Garry Hardman is a leader in the field of composition for film and television in Australia. Early on, Garry worked in radio stations in Melbourne, learning about music and sound engineering. He also managed to balance midnight shifts with being lead guitarist in the popular rock and roll band The Commotions. In 1977, he moved to Sydney and established his own music production company, Australian Screen Music. Since then, Garry has written and produced scores for numerous Australian feature films, mini-series and serial television.
I had to do everything in my power to stop her from suffering.
Blue Healers is guitar-based. I've got a week to do the program, and sometimes I'll play some slide guitar.
It was never
Texas.
my intention to harm the prisoner. And in retrospect, what I did next wasn't too bright.
At the moment, doing two television drama series, one for the ABC and one for the 7 Network. The one for the 7 Network is a program called Blue Healers. I'm not given a brief for that. All I'm given is a videotape. There are no notes. Occasionally there might be a request from a director or a producer saying, would you consider doing this in this particular scene? The whole basis of the soundtrack is the Fender sound, but occasionally we'll get an acoustic guitar in there or whatever, depending on the scene. If it's a soft scene and it's a sad scene, then acoustic guitar is probably the way to go. With this particular scene that I'd like you to see, basically the story is that there's a child molester in town, the police having captive a suspect whom we as the viewers feel has committed these crimes. The police feel and definitely know he has, but there's no way they can prove it. One police officer takes it to heart that this man is the child molester and goes into the cell to, which he shouldn't do. He's breaking the law by going into the cell at this particular time. However, he just goes in to chat to this guy to see if he can make him see reason and own up to these heinous crimes.
Get him away from me!
There's no one out there, Vince. I just want to talk to you. The singer's brought this photograph in, and I just want you to look at it.
I thought, well, hey, I'd like to put some music in this scene because I feel that I can add to this scene with my little attempts at adding some extra tension. So therefore, I took it upon myself to put some tension music in this scene.
You want to just have a look? She's just a little girl, Vince, just a tiny little girl who's away from parents that love her. And they don't know what's going on, they don't understand it.
To get the feel I had in my mind, I decided to use a string bed with some electric guitar that was just sparsely injected into the string sounds. Normally I don't use string sounds in Blue Healers, but in this instance I thought the string bed with a bit of guitar over it and a bit of percussion was probably the best way to go. I felt a nice sort of sustained feel. It was probably quite chilling.
So how important do you think the underscore music is? I mean, how much of a difference to a scene is the music able to have?
Quite a bit. I mean, the old cliche, of course, is to refer to Jaws and the music in Jaws, telescoping what is about to happen before it actually happens. But I think it's very important. I mean, the wrong music can certainly ruin a scene. Music in a scene where music shouldn't be placed can ruin a scene. But I think if it's a scene full of tension, then if the music's not too obtrusive, you can certainly underscore that.
Please just stop suffering. Don't talk to me about suffering. I've lived through more pain than you can possibly imagine, my friend. We don't all have perfect childhoods, you know. Why should this little bitch be any different? She's asking for it. You're all asking for it. And I don't have a conscience. End of story.
Tell me where she is.
You'll never find her, never.
Give me back the photo.
What?
I like the feel of the program. I like the approach of the whole production, and I just enjoy doing it. It's fun to do. It's not a sweat job. It's a nice, casual, sort of laid-back approach.
So is melody an important factor in music scoring?
It can be an important factor, but it can also be something to be very wary of if you're underscoring a scene. I mean, music should be embedded into the soundtrack as an element that people shouldn't be really aware of. So therefore, by putting a melody in, you're really saying to them, listen to my music. You know? Don't worry about what they're saying on the screen. Go back and watch it a second time. Just listen to the melody. So underscoring a dialogue scene, you would mainly be using chord structures. A smattering of the motif throughout the film is okay, but don't build a whole soundtrack on it.
So how often would you get a chance to, or would you be inclined to use music that subverts the scene, the emotional content of the scene, that maybe goes against the obvious expectation?
I like doing that because it's always a good approach to do something like that. I think the most obvious thing of going against the norm is again in the placement of music, and also in where you're not having music. Mm-hmm. I think the presence of music can invoke certainly its own character and its own emotion, married with the emotion on the screen. Bang! I mean, it's if you're doing it correctly, it's bound to work. By the same token, that scene may work better without having any music at all. I mean, you can get some great tension from a clock ticking in a room if there's an axeman running around somewhere, rather than just having the pounding feel of terror.
And so now the impossible question of how you actually go about finding the music that's appropriate to a dramatic situation.
Where does it come from? Where does the original story come from? Out of thin air, I guess. I mean, one of the few areas of the production process that relies solely on a creative idea to suddenly flick on like a light bulb is music. The other one, of course, is the story. Mm-hmm. I generally look at the scene and I'll just play around with a keyboard, and it might be a piano sound that works well, and it may lend itself then to an arrangement. So, or I might find that piano sound is enough on its own. I don't know, but with the majority of my work, which is basically these days television, I'm guided by the format of the program anyway. I mean, there's always a format established early on in the series whereby you stick to that, and there are certain sounds that go with that program that you keep using.
What are you given in your brief, and what limitations are you really working within?
Well, limitations, I mean, I think the biggest limitation to begin with is, pardon me, the limitation of time. There is never enough of that, followed by a limitation of budget. I mean, you'll have a producer come along that says, how close to an orchestral sound can you get me? Because they don't want to spend the money on a proper orchestra. I'll say, well, it's very limited, because once you start getting too many of these beasts going together at once, it starts to sound like an organ. And there's nothing you can do about it, no matter how good the samples are. So there are limitations on these things, and I mean, you can never replace an orchestra.
And so when did you first get interested in film music?
Oh, that goes back to when I was about 8. Going to the Saturday afternoon matinees with my friends, whilst they were taking interest in the plot and the story and the Indians winning over the cavalry or vice versa. I used to notice the music and wonder how it got there, and it was sort of magical to me to have this music playing and arousing my emotions. So I think that was my first sort of indication of film music being in existence.
And so when did you first get a chance to write music for film? When did you first get into the industry?
There was an ad in the paper for somebody working in radio who had an interest in doing music for television drama, and I figured that was me, and the company was Corporate Productions. So I went there, and they explained to me the duties of a music editor, what would be involved, and I'd be working on a program called Homicide. That was a very mechanical sort of job, but by doing that I had to listen to the arrangement of the music so that I could know where I could cut and what I'd be cutting out. For instance, cutting from, say, bar 8 to bar 12, suddenly the strings might just cut off. and of course when you cut to bar 12, the strings just suddenly have stopped. So it was learning all those sort of things, that was the mechanical side of things, that made me listen to arrangements of drama music. Apart from Homicide, Crawford used to do the occasional documentary, and I was asked one day if I would mind bringing my guitar in and would I like to maybe play along to this documentary, which was on the process of milk going from the cow to the doorstep. And I thought, yeah, great, I'd love to do this. So I played the guitar and somebody hit a little bit of metal on a milk bottle, and that was the combo. That was the arrangement, guitar and milk bottle. But it worked.
And it worked.
I made the decision to try and get into composing full time when I got my first APRA check. You know, which I think was about $17 or something, but it was great. And I thought, hey, you get paid for this as well.
Garry keeps a very busy schedule. He thrives in his chosen field and relishes the opportunity to put his music on screen.